Hey, what's going on, everybody? Andrew Frazier here, founder of DogiZone, and I am here again with you for another Ask the Doggy Experts Live. So happy to be with you all, and I'm not sure why it feels this way, but it feels like it's been a really long time since we've done this. So even though it was just last month that we were here, happy to be back with you again. And tonight is going to be a really, hopefully, educational night for many of you. We have a wonderful topic to talk about, which is the fact that this month is National Pet First Aid Awareness Month. Now, how many of you knew that it was National Pet First Aid Awareness Month? I'm just curious. For those of you that are logging in here, we'd love to hear from you, and I'd love to know how many of you knew that it was Pet First Aid Awareness Month, and how many of you feel really knowledgeable? Give us a number. Just type into the comments. Are you a 10? You feel like if something came up with your dog, you feel really confident that you would know that there's something out of the ordinary and you would know how to treat the dog? Or are you more like a 1, where like anything that you notice with the dog, first thing you do is pick up the phone and call the veterinarian? How many of you would rate yourself a 1 or a 10, or maybe somewhere in between? Let's see what kind of level we have here of knowledge about first aid here. Let's see what we got here. Thumbs up for Jessica. And yes, I'm sad to say that Jessica and George will not be with us this evening. We do have a special guest with us here. Foxy, come here. She's sleeping. She needs to wake up a little bit. Our model for the night is going to be Foxy, and Foxy will be joining us to be our model for snout to tail assessments and taking vitals of your dog. So we're gonna cover a bunch of great stuff. So we got somewhere in between. We got a 3, a 4. Matt says he's a 1, and we actually have Matt here this evening helping out. Sorry for the technical difficulties getting started here. But we were trying to do something fancy, and sometimes doing fancy stuff doesn't work out how you'd like it to. So anyways, without further ado, I want to kind of run through what our agenda is for this evening. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about snout to tail assessments. Now, for those of you that haven't heard of a snout to tail assessment, this is gold. This is something that you are going to probably start doing with your dog every single day. And many of you are probably doing something quite similar to this, but maybe aren't doing it systematically, or maybe you're not doing it in a way that actually gives you actionable information. So we're going to walk you through this snout to tail assessment and give you a systematic and very deliberate method for evaluating and knowing what your dog's need is, which will be really helpful for a lot of you. One of the things that I would suggest for tonight, we're going to be covering a lot of information. I'm going to be going at a very fast pace. So you can always rewatch the video, but today would be a great day for you to have a pen and paper with you to take notes as we go through some of this information. So just keep that in mind. And I would even encourage you, if you have a fresh notebook, make that your dog's health log. How many of you have a health log for your dog? Anybody? If you do, type into the comments for us if you have a health log for your dog. I know that I maintain a training log for my dogs so that I can keep track of my training times and what it is that I'm practicing and their progression through training. Having a health log can be part of that training log, and it's really just a way for you to be able to make sure that the information that you're learning about your dog is kept track of so that you can properly educate your veterinarian. So one of the things that I would like to just let everybody know here is, first off, I am by no means a veterinarian. I did not go to school to become a veterinarian. What I'm going to be sharing with you today is knowledge that I've accumulated over the past 15 years of working in the pet industry. I have been through pet first aid and CPR training programs. I was actually at one time a certified instructor for a first aid and CPR program. I no longer have the time to perform those trainings in a group setting. So it's something that I'm going to be bringing to you all here. And I think that you all will, again, find this to be very helpful information. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about what this snout to tail assessment is. First off, you should be able to touch every single part of your dog. There should be no area on your dog that you cannot touch. This is extremely important because in order for us to really know our dog's health status, we need to be able to evaluate everything from snout to tail. So I want you to recognize that if today your dog maybe doesn't let you touch their feet, or maybe they don't like you opening up their mouth, just know that this is a process. This isn't a project that you're going to do this one time. This is a daily habit that we would like for you to get into. And by having this daily habit, it will become a very relaxing experience for both you and for your dog. It should not be a stressful experience. And what I like to do is start off by actually teaching my dogs a little bit of what I call a cradle and massage, which is where I can actually pick the dog up and lay them down on my legs. And I'm going to bring my big old 50-pound dog here up onto my lap for just a second. And you can see Foxy's pretty relaxed being up here. I don't think she doesn't really mind this a whole lot. And this is what you want to be able to do with your dog. You want to be able to pick them up and you want to be able to have this bonding experience with them. And it shouldn't be a combative type of experience. So Foxy will get more time. You can see she's like thinking about falling asleep here, right? Yeah, I know, you're a good girl. So I will, we'll get into a little bit more of how this snout to tail assessment is going to go, but we want you to be able to very easily pick up your dog, cradle them, massage them, and do a full snout to tail assessment. By doing this, you are going to pick up on things that you would have never expected. I've found ticks on my dogs. I've found lumps on my dogs. I've noticed all sorts of things that if I wasn't doing this on a regular basis, I would not pick up on. There's an old saying many of you have heard before: an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That's right, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And by doing this and being able to really understand your dog's health, you will find that you're going to pick up on things before they become a bigger issue. And I believe that if you're doing preventative care with your dog, you're actually going to help your dog to live a longer, healthier life. And that's the goal here. We want you to enjoy your dog for as long as possible. So let's go ahead and get into our snout to tail assessment. So I brought Foxy along here because she's a pretty good girl. She's enjoys being pet and handled and having everything checked over on her. There's really nothing that she won't allow us to do. And that's what we want to help you to get to. But remember that if you have a dog that's not quite as tolerant as Foxy, you may need to break this up into smaller segments, and you may need to do this snout to tail assessment through 2, 3, 4 little short sessions throughout the day. I can typically do a snout to tail assessment on my dog in about 5 minutes or less. I'm not sure we'll get through it that quickly since I'm going to be trying to explain a little bit of what I'm doing as I'm going through and doing this. So just know that it's not something that you need to be able to do from the very beginning, snout to tail. All right, so Foxy, are you ready to go, girl? So there is, like I said, a very systematic and methodical way that we should be going about doing this snout to tail assessment. So since really watching me is not going to be the important part, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to reposition my camera here so that we can focus this down on Miss Foxy. Now, we always want to start and stop at the same place with the dog. So I'm going to be starting off with Foxy's head. Now, what you want to do is you want to begin at the snout, and you want to essentially look over your dog's nose. And there's an old wise tale that dogs' noses should be cold and wet. And I want to just kind of help to make sure that you understand what that means. There should not be any excessive discharge coming from your dog's nose, nor should it be cracked and hard and dry. So we want to just kind of take our fingers, and I can just run it over her nose, and it's nice and wet and damp, not really a whole lot there going on. She's in pretty healthy shape, okay? I'm also going to be checking her snout here for any lumps or bumps or anything that might be out of the ordinary here. And you can see Foxy like this. In fact, earlier when I was doing this, I found a little bump on her face. And I noticed that there was a little nick from when she was playing with one of the other dogs, and she was playing a little bit too rough and had a little bump there. So you want to just kind of be paying attention to what is it that you're feeling there. Now, Fox, you think it's playtime right now, don't you? Now, after I've kind of gone through and I've checked the dog's snout over and the mouth over, I'm going to actually move into looking at her teeth, her mouth, and her gums. And it looks like she's going to just get nice up and close and personal for us on this. So what we want to do is we want to be able to open up the dog's mouth. And Foxy definitely wants to play right now. And I'm just going to gently open up her mouth here. In fact, since she's rolling around, we're just going to go ahead and scoop her up. And so I'm just going to kind of gently squeeze here. I'm just going to look in her mouth. And there's not a whole lot going on in there. Looking at the roof of her mouth. I'm also going to just kind of go ahead and lift up on her gums, check her teeth. And everything looks pretty good there. Just kind of looking over. If you can see her gums here, they're kind of pink. And with most dogs, that's the way that it should be. Okay. Some dogs will have black gums. And if they have black gums, that, if that's normal for them, then that's okay. Now, if they're normally pink and then they're black, that may be a different story. And I'm actually going to be talking to you guys after this about how to check vitals. And one of those things is going to be checking their capillary refill. So we'll talk about that here shortly. Now, since Foxy knows that I'm working so we're just going to look over here, and I'm looking at her teeth as well. I want to make sure that there's nothing chipped, cracked, and her teeth are looking really in pretty good shape here. She's a pretty good chewer. She chews on some really good high quality stuff, so there's not a lot of tartar on her teeth, but that's something that we want to watch for. Tartar buildup is one of those leading issues to other issues. So looking pretty good here, Miss Fox. Now, while I'm up here on her head, I'm going to be looking at her eyes. I'm going to look in and see if there's any discharge coming from her eyes. There should be some tracking of your movement. So if you have something that you can move in front of the dog's eye, you can see as I move my hand here, and I may be getting in the way a little bit. But you can see when I move my hand, her eyes are tracking with my hand. I don't know if you all are able to see that, but I want to see that when I move my hand that the dog's eyes are following that, which doesn't seem to be a problem here. Now, as we're going through up here in the head, we're going to go through kind of the crown and the skull, which is going to be up here towards the top. And I'm just going to kind of check over, and I'm just feeling for any abrasions, bumps, masses, tenderness, any sores. You may notice here, I don't know if you'll be able to see it or not, but I found this little, like I said, I found a little nick on her earlier from playing with one of the other dogs. at home. Her and her friend Lily really get into it. But had I not done this, I would not have picked up on that, and I wouldn't have been able to keep an eye on that. So really important to be able to see exactly what's new versus what's already there with your dog. Because a lot of the times there's things that have been there for an extended period of time, and if we're not looking our dog over, then we're not going to see those things. The next thing I'm going to do to finish up with the head is I'm going to check her ears, okay? And when I'm checking ears, they should not have any odor. There should not be any discharge. So you can see she's got pretty clean ears. Give it a little sniff. I know you thought that was kind of funny, wasn't it? And you cannot, I'm not getting any odor or anything like that. There's not any sensitivity. She's pretty tolerant of the ears. If there's sensitivity, if there's odor, discharge, then that's a problem. And we want to check both ears. We want to make sure that things are pretty congruent on both sides. So I'm just going to go ahead and little sniff test there. Yes, you can smell your dog's ears. It's not a big deal. All right, you're being a good girl, aren't you? You're kind of loving this, aren't you? Yeah, you're a good girl. All right. So the next thing that I'm going to do here is we're going to move to checking her neck and her spine. So I'm actually going to reposition her for this. And the way that we like to do this is by having the dog actually up in a sitting position. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of place my hand on the back of her neck here. I'm going to take my other hand and I'm going to run my hand just kind of down her back and down her spine. And I'm just feeling for any lumps, bumps, abnormalities, tenderness. And she doesn't seem to have anything going on here. So we're looking like we're in pretty good shape. If there's any pain, if there's any discomfort, if there's any kind of guarding behavior where the dog's resisting you a lot in a specific area, take note of that. And it may be something that you need to keep an eye on. All right, next we're going to go to her chest and ribs. So you should be able to easily feel the ribs under the dog's fur. Okay. You should also be taking note of their breathing. So it should be smooth, easy, rhythmic. And we'll talk about how to check your dog's breathing rate here shortly. And she's in pretty good shape here. All right. The next thing that I'm going to do after the ribs is I'm going to check each of the front legs. Okay. We want to take note of range of motion. We're on a slippery floor here, and Foxy is going to flop over on me and be a dead fish right now, aren't you? I know. So we're just going to help her up. And if you have a blob like mine, you may need to use your feet to kind of support them from sliding around. So I want to check her range of motion, which there doesn't seem to be any issue with. I'm going to kind of extend her leg. Okay. And from here, I'm just going to check in between her toes. I'm going to check each nail. Okay. Now her nails are getting a little bit long. I'm watching as I'm looking at the nails. Is there any chips? Is there any cracks? I'm feeling in between the toes. I'm taking note of the paws, the pads of the paws in between. And Foxy doesn't have any dew claws, but if she did, it'd be that inside thumb piece, and that would be right around here. Don't see anything there going on as well. And we're going to go ahead and make sure that we do this on both legs. Another thing to watch for is excessive hair. Some of your long-haired dogs will get quite a bit of hair in this portion here. And if they do, that's something that you'll generally want to have trimmed when they're at the groomer. And that will help them to have a little bit better traction. And do the same thing. We're going to check her range of motion. That's very good. And check in between the toes, the pads, the nail. And I'm just going to go through each one here. And again, this is where you would see the dew claw if she had one. And these dew claws, a lot of the times, because they're not walking around on the ground, they can get pretty short, pretty long, and start to curl around. So that's definitely one that you want to be paying attention to. All right, so after we finish going through the front legs, the next step is to go through the hind legs. So, Foxy, come. And I'm just going to go ahead and lift her up here. And I'm going to do the same thing on her rear end. And I'm going to check her range of motion on her leg. And it's looking pretty good. Okay. I'm also going to check through the paws, same as on the front legs. And since you've watched me do this on 2 feet already, we won't waste your time going through the other 2 because we know Fox is already doing pretty good. But I'm going to, again, check the range of motion on this other leg. And I'm just going to feel again between the toes, and we're in good shape. So those are the rear legs and paws. Now, the next section that we have here is our abdomen. Okay, this abdominal area here, you want to use the flats of your hand, okay, and you're going to palpate the abdominal area and see if you notice anything that may be sensitive, painful, or hard. Now, Foxy has recently had a false pregnancy. So that's something that I'm paying particularly close attention to right now. And I just found it looks like a little scab on her stomach here. And that's probably, again, from playing with the other dogs and just getting a little rowdy at times. So I'm just going to take note of that and know that that's an area that I want to watch. Make sure that that's all healing up okay. Okay. As we're going through and looking at the abdomen, we're also going to want to check the genital areas. We want to make sure that there's no discharge. Okay. There should not be any discharge, male or female. Now, obviously, if you have a dog that's not spayed, it's possible that they may have a heat cycle that they're going through. But in general, I usually recommend that people spay their dogs. And if you do, then you don't have to have a whole lot of worry about that. The anal area should be free of hair. We don't want an excessive amount of hair there. If you've got one of these longer coated dogs, sometimes debris will get caught there. Sometimes you'll have feces that gets caught in that area. So you're going to want to go ahead and just be aware of that. And then lastly, we have the tail. So I'm just going to examine that for any deformities. Sometimes they'll have a little crimp in their tail if it's been stepped on. I'm checking for range of motion. She doesn't seem to be bothered by a whole lot of that. And as we've gone through this entire process, I've been paying attention to her skin, her coat, and I'm just looking for excessive shedding, any differences in texture. With Foxy, the ridge along the top of her back, you can go ahead and put it back. The ridge of her hair along the top of her back is a lot more coarse than on the sides of her body. And so that's just something that I'm aware of. A lot of the times what you're going to be picking up on may not be anything new to you, but it's important for you to be aware of. In this way, if there is a change there, you know that it's something that's changed versus, something that may not have been there before. So Okay, so that was a little challenging. Not going to lie, I was thinking it might be a little bit easier, but our technical failure earlier made the video of this much more challenging than we expected. So hopefully you were able to get the gist of that. The big thing here is to just have a method. Have a method that you consistently follow that's going to allow you to regularly look over the dog. There is a number of different pet first aid and CPR programs out there. And some of them are good. Some of them are very, very basic. Having this snout to tail assessment is something that you should just make part of your daily routine. Now we get into some of the little bit more fun, but a little bit more challenging things to do. And that's going to come down to checking vitals for your pets. So we're going to talk a little bit about what are some of the vitals that you should be watching. And we'll just kind of talk through those versus me trying to go through and do them all by video. Some of them I may be able to demonstrate, and some of them will be a little bit more challenging to do right now. So the first one is checking your dog's pulse. Checking your dog's pulse is a pretty easy thing for you to do. It's not a real invasive thing to be able to do. And you're going to be checking this at the dog's femoral artery. And most of us know where the femoral artery is on us is, and it's in a very similar location on your dog's rear legs. So I'm going to see if I can get Foxy over here to, will you let us have your femoral artery? Since she's laying down here, this will be a perfect way for us to do it. And I'm just going to kind of take my fingers and I'm going to find that femoral artery. And I like to use my two middle fingers. And so I've got my two middle fingers placed right here on her femoral artery. I'm not sure if you're able to see that or not. That's the location that we're going to be looking for. Okay. So once you've found that location on the dog, you're going to place your fingers there and you're going to watch and count how many beats for 6 seconds. Now, 6 seconds is a very short period of time, but for some dogs, that's going to be the easiest count for you to get if you have a real wiggler. So after 6 seconds, you can just add a 0 to that number, and that will give you the beats per minute. Another count that you can go with is 30 seconds. And if you have a dog that's a little bit more calm, Foxy would probably happily let me do that for 30 seconds. And if you have a dog that can let you count for 30 seconds, then you can double that. And that will get you again to your beats per minute. The average pulse rate for adult dogs can vary quite a bit. Can be anywhere from 60 to 140 beats per minute. Your toy breeds, your small breed dogs can actually be a little bit closer to 90 to 140 beats per minute. So they're going to be a little bit higher. So this is something that you want to just take note of. What's your dog's resting pulse rate? So I would generally do this at a time where your dog is fairly relaxed to get what their resting pulse rate is. That is the best time to get it. It's not a bad idea to also check the pulse rate of your dog after exercise and to get an idea of when you've gone for that long walk with your dog. After that long walk, what is their pulse rate? Again, these are baselines that are just helpful for you to be aware of. And this way, if there's something abnormal going on with your dog, you can check these things like their pulse rate, their breathing, some of these other things. And you can know, are they within the range of normal for them or not? And if they're not, then I would encourage you to get them to the vet. That being said, this does a lot of the times, if you're really methodical and really keeping track of your dog's health, can save you a number of vet visits, because you can recognize, hey, this is pretty much normal for my dog, versus having to freak out. You're not sure if it's normal for your dog. So being educated about your dog and what's normal for them and what's not is extremely beneficial. The next thing is to visually or manually check your dog's breathing. Okay. Checking with your dog's breathing. There's a couple of ways to do this, but it is probably easier to do by actually manually checking the breathing. So I want to talk a little bit about that for a second. So a breath is a rise and fall of the chest. Okay. So count the breaths. One breath equals a rise and fall for 30 seconds. And then you're going to double that to get their breathing rate. Okay. It's very similar to how it is that we did the pulse rate, except for we're going to be putting our hand on the side of the dog's chest. And we are also going to be placing our hand on the dog's neck. So I'll try to demonstrate this for you here so that you can physically see what it is that I'm talking about here. So I've got my hand positioned here on the dog's chest. And I'm not applying really a whole lot of pressure, but I'm able to count how many times up and down we get. And again, you're going to want to count that for 30 seconds. I'm not going to spend the full time doing that right now, but just more or less showing you where your hand should be placed. Okay. And that hand is just going to be just slightly behind their front leg on the chest. As you are counting that, you're going to get to your minute number, and you want to be aiming for them to be at a normal rate would be between 10 and 30 breaths per minute is what we would consider normal. Earlier we mentioned talking about gum color. Okay. And when we talk about the color of a dog's gums, we say that they should be kind of a pink and, almost like bubble gum color. So one of the things that you can do is when you lift up the dog's lip is you can take your finger and you can just press against their gum. Okay. And what you will find is that if you remove it, it should return to a normal color within 1 to 2 seconds, which is your capillary refill time. So you want to be looking for that bubblegum pink color. If you see pale white gums, that can be something related to anemia. Yellow and can indicate jaundice, and blue and gray can also indicate shock. So you just want to be aware of that. And yes, there are some dogs that are going to have naturally dark gums, and it's a lot of the times you're going to see that in some of your chows and some of those types of breeds. So a dog that is got a very slow capillary refill time should be something that you get addressed immediately. There could be something very significant going on with the dog. And so getting to them to the vet ASAP is definitely something that I would recommend. Last but not least, in terms of checking your dog's vitals, is to be thinking about their temperature. Now, we're not going to check Foxy's temperature. I think every single one of you who've taken a visit to the vet know what taking a dog's temperature is like. It's not necessarily what we would consider the most fun experience for them. And checking your dog's vitals is not something that we're going to suggest that you do every single day. But when you find that there's something out of the ordinary going with your dog, knowing how to check these vitals is important. So know that their temperature can range from one breed to another. Pretty common temperatures are going to be between 100.4 and 102.5 degrees Fahrenheit. I would suggest if you're going to be checking your dog's temperature, you want to make sure that you use a digital thermometer. They tend to be a little bit easier to use for this type of thing. A little accurate, a little bit more safe to use with your dog. And I'm going to just go ahead and let you know, if you're a little unsure about how to take your dog's temperature, I'm not going to be the guy to teach you to do it. So that's something that you can work with on your vet, with your vet, or take a pet first aid course. So just keep that in mind. Something that you may want to learn down the road as your dog gets a little bit more comfortable with you handling and doing all those types of things. So as we are kind of bringing things to a conclusion here, I want to just kind of talk a little bit about some emergency preparedness, because I think that a lot of the times people don't really know what being prepared looks like. And so we're going to just talk through a little bit of how you can make sure that you are prepared for an emergency situation. So I'd like to start off and just kind of walk you through some of the information that you should have close at hand when you're doing, putting together your plan for emergency preparedness. I think it's always good to have 2 emergency contacts for your dog. A lot of the times I find it interesting when we have owners who are coming to DogiZone and we ask for an emergency contact while they're away. And we're so grateful that a lot of the times we never really need to use that. But a lot of people don't have a plan for having an emergency contact. And it could be a friend, it could be a family member. Sometimes you may not have a lot of friends or family members where you're at with your dog. But even still, neighbors can be great resources as well. So sometimes you have to be creative when it comes to who is my dog's emergency contact. If something happens to me, who is going to be the person to take care of my dog? And that's a tough thing to think through sometimes, but one that's really important. You should know your local police telephone number. A lot of the times you may have emergencies that come up that may not necessarily be a 911 emergency, but would be helpful to have your local police number, your veterinarian's number, your local animal shelter's number, and of course, your home address. I would suggest that you have an emergency card for your dog. We are actually in the process of putting one together for you. And so if you think that that's something that you'd be interested in, we have a digital version that we can send to you that you can fill out. And if you would just go ahead and comment into the comment bar and let us know that you're interested, we can reach out to you offline and we can provide you with a digital version that you can print out and have at home. Some other important things to keep in mind is poison control. We talked a bit about that last month. If you missed our episode last month, we had a whole talk about that. And that would be an important number for you to have on hand as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about a disaster kit checklist. We have had, luckily in our area, no major natural disasters here, but I know in different parts of the country, it may be very different. And so always being prepared is something that we would encourage for you to do. So from a food perspective, I would suggest that you have a 1-week supply of food in a sealed container. Now, I wouldn't suggest that you prepare that tonight and put it away for 8 months and never use it. But that should be on your list so that in the case of an emergency disaster, I need to go ahead and get a week's worth of food. Having that in a sealed container so that way it doesn't go bad on you is really important. And this way, if you need to transfer your dog to a different food, you have something that you can transfer them over or to get you through things. Having a can opener, spoon, things like that to make sure that you can prepare that meal. Another one is going to be water. Again, having a 1 week supply of water, whether that's water bottles or whether that's a Camelback or some other type of sealed container, having that supply is also going to be important. Avoid storing that in direct sunlight because obviously when we leave water inside of a plastic container in direct sunlight, the quality of that water is going to diminish. For your first aid kit, I would suggest that you have a basic first aid kit and book. There's lots of different options out there, so I'm not going to try to tell you which one is best. I think you need to explore what's best for you and your dog. The first aid kit that I bought, my first aid kit that I bought was for hunting dogs. And it had a ton of stuff in it. It actually came with a stapler so that if my dog had a major laceration, I could staple my dog. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I just took the stapler and threw it out because I'm going to take my dog to the vet if I have that type of issue. But some very basic stuff, some vet wraps, some gauze pads, things like that are things that you're definitely going to want to make sure of. If your dog is on any prescription medications, make sure that you have those medications. Heartworm, flea and tick preventative is also another really important thing. And another thing that a lot of people don't necessarily think about when it comes to emergency preparedness is identification for your dog. Make sure that you're very clear on some of the distinguishing features of your dog. If you have a Labrador or a Golden Retriever, they can be very easily confused. And if you ever have to identify your dog because they ended up in a shelter, they got away from you from a car accident or whatever the case may be, you're going to be able to need to prove that that dog is your dog. So have photos of you with your dogs. Yep, bust out those selfie sticks and get some pictures, but also know what are some of the distinguishing features. Some dogs have tattoos on them. Some dogs will also have just different markings that are very easy to delineate. Make sure that you have a temporary ID tag for your dog. So if you don't have an ID on them, things like the microchips are great, but actually having that ID tag is also very helpful. I personally have really liked the ID tags that fit onto the collar and are not the type that fit on a ring. And they don't jingle around and create that really annoying noise running around through the house all the time. Also, make sure you have a copy of your dog's vaccination records with you on hand. Also, another really important piece. From a care perspective, obviously you want to have your leash and collar or harness. I also suggest having a carrier for your dog, whether it's a crate or whether it's a soft carrier. Those are things that are really beneficial in emergency situations where you have to move quickly. There's a number of different things out on the market. I will say that a lot of the portable crates are not chew-proof, so be very careful that you're not using that at the wrong time. And then also they make some great collapsible food and water bowls, which are great. They are pretty easy to clean and can travel very easily. And last but not least for your kit would be some cleaning supplies, paper towels, dish soap, plastic bags, all of those basic cleaning supplies that you would want to be able to clean up in your house or in your car or wherever the case may be. So those are some of the things from your checklist. Now, I want to just run you through some of the essentials. The first one is find a place that takes dogs of your size and breed during an emergency situation. Pet-friendly hotels, DogiZone, friends, family. Where are you going to take your dog? if you need to leave them. Very important. Have a written list of these evacuation locations with your disaster kit. And I would also, if your dog's not used to traveling in the car, I would practice loading them and unloading them in and out of the vehicle, in and out of the car. And if you have a dog that hates the car or doesn't like traveling, that's definitely something that our trainers can help you to teach them how to jump in and out. As I mentioned earlier, microchip your dogs. A sturdy, legible ID tag on your dog's collar is great, but a microchip is even better. And just make sure that if your dog is microchipped and you're moving, that you're updating that frequently. We alluded to this earlier with emergency contacts, but if you can start a buddy system and find somebody to exchange keys with. If you're ever in a situation where you're not able to get back home to your dog, you want to have somebody who can get in and get to your dog. Give your buddy your dog's emergency information. Let them know where that emergency kit is. And DogiZone, for those of you that are in our area, are happy to be part of your buddy system. Although we may not necessarily be always able to be your buddy during hours that are outside of our normal business hours. So we are an option, but having a second or third person always makes sense. We talked about your disaster kit and photos for your dog. And those are really the last pieces that you want to make sure that you have so that you can be successful in an emergency or disaster type of situation. Now, I think we are kind of coming up to the end of our time here, and I hope that you found this evening informative. I know that we went through a lot quickly, and we were aiming to have some fancy video stuff for you today that we weren't able to pull off at the last minute here, but we will certainly have some resources that we can share with you. So for those of you that were interested in the emergency disaster card, we'll be more than happy to share that with you. Just go ahead and reply into the comments to send you the card, and we'll make sure to get that out to you in the next couple days. If there is anybody who you think could benefit from hearing about what we spoke about tonight, we would love it if you went ahead and shared this with them. Appreciate everybody's time and coming on and joining us here. I'm looking forward to seeing some of you in the very near future. So we hope you have a better than great day. Talk to you soon.